Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing an analysis of the draft between DRX and Top Esports. And something really cool happened this draft that won't happen too often, where I completely disagreed with every other analyst on Twitter. I think most people that I saw thought on Twitter thought that DRX won this draft hard. Now, Top Esports does end up winning the game, but that doesn't actually mean that their draft was better. You can win the game and have a worse draft, right? I'm not using that as one of my arguments, but I did find that a lot of people thought that DRX's draft was much stronger. As a matter of fact, even during this cast, Froskuren calls the draft a draft kingdom. So I thought it was really cool that my opinion differed so wildly from everyone else's. So let's take a look at this draft, and we're going to talk about what aspects of Top's I like and what of DRX's I didn't like, and let's see if we can find our own conclusions. So beginning this draft off, the things that I want to point out are some of Chovy's heroes are banned, right? A lot of Chovy's pressure is negated with the Lucian and PF ban, but the more important bans that I want to talk about are, first of all, the two farming junglers are banned. The last super viable farming jungler up is Graves, and that would kind of be the more obvious first pick for DRX, but at the same time it's kind of obvious bait. The Top Esports is saying, hey, we left up Graves and the two other meta farming junglers are banned, you should pick it, right? So that's like one of those mind games that happens more, one of those common mind games. And the other big ban I want to talk about here is Syndra, and we'll get to why Syndra is an important ban in a little bit, but let's see how the draft goes. So the first pick is not Graves, but instead is Caitlyn. So Caitlyn represents a lot of things, right? Caitlyn is a hero that you really have to play through because in order for her to get into a good spot in the game and to scale into late game well, she basically needs to take a bunch of tower plates to accelerate her gold gains. So that does give us some clues as to what DRX is looking to play like, maybe. And Top Esports responds with Ashe, a very common counter pick to Caitlyn, can actually match Caitlyn in the lane. Only 50 range differing, and volley, of course, is a really strong lane tool, even against high range targets. And the other reason that people like Ashe into Caitlyn is because it's difficult for Caitlyn to get out of arrow, even when Caitlyn tries to E away. But Ashe is a very flexible hero, right? You can initiate on Caitlyn if you want to, and Ashe doesn't necessarily need to be in initiation comps. She can also play more reactively. Graves, kind of similar. Graves, for the most part, is going to play out the best when people are coming towards him, and he can just stack up his grit and be somewhat of a frontliner. Graves tends to struggle sometimes when he needs to go forward, needs to follow up, and the main thing that he struggles with is stuff that outranges him, stuff like Caitlyn, stuff like Poke, but nonetheless, he's a tier 1 pick, so that is what Top Esports goes with. But we can safely already say that Graves wasn't an amazing pick into Caitlyn. It was more just his potential in the meta. DRX has a plan. When they see that Graves is picked, they're like, don't worry, we got the perfect Graves pick. Kindred is a well-known Graves counter. Kindred will actually scale to outrange Graves at later points in the game. So you get the range advantage while still scaling alongside him. You're not just going to fall off on scaling. Kindred's a really strong scaling hero, so you match the farming while also getting a range advantage. Super good counter. A lot of people consider that a very strong Graves counter. Kindred, definitely one of my favorite heroes that people don't often pick. Now, this is the part where I think DRX's draft goes way off the rails. They decide to go Galio. Now, I know what you're thinking. You think I'm upset because they put Chovy on a more supportive hero? Not at all. I'm not even thinking about that. Galio is very specific in the way he works, and I'm going to need everyone to try and visualize how Galio works. First of all, Galio is actually terrible when he's grouped with his teammates, right? Because it's really hard to get a good ult off. You usually will want to try and be in a side lane, or at least rotating to where the fight is going to be and ulting in. So let's think about the two ways the Galio's ult can work out. He can either initiate with it, or he can peel with it. So how does Galio's initiation with his ult work? He uses it by landing on top of an initiator, right? Now, there's a very specific type of initiator that Galio synergizes with, though. He synergizes with heroes like Jarvan, like Olaf, like Camille. Why does he synergize with these heroes? Because those heroes put their bodies forward when they initiate. For example, a champion like Ashe is a really strong initiator as well, but she doesn't put her body forward when she initiates. She initiates with her arrow, right? The spell. She doesn't actually put her body forward, so Galio following up with ult isn't helpful, right? Galio's going to want something like the Camille, where Camille dives in with her E, and then he can ult on top of her. So that's the one way Galio's used, and that would be a reasonable. That's how most people use him in most comps. And then the other way he can be used is he can follow up on a fight, peeling with his ult, coming down with his ult, and then using his E and his W to peel. And you have to imagine that's more of what DRX is currently looking at with their composition, because they have two backliners that don't initiate. So Galio would be off in a side lane perhaps, and if top were to initiate, Galio would fall on top of the Kindred or the Caitlyn and try and provide peel and protect them. And that is precisely why I immediately didn't like seeing this Galio pick. I find that Graves and Ashe are already very malleable in how they can fit into compositions, and top esports by no means has to draft harder initiate than what they already have. If top doesn't choose to draft any more initiate, Galio's going to have a very hard time finding his identity in this composition, because Galio's a really bad hero at just standing around and trying to match 5v5s. And I think we'll get to that a little bit later, but if you want to try and visualize it in your head, Galio is terrible at initiating with his E ability, right? All it takes is one frontliner to be in front of him, and he has nowhere to go, right? Galio Eing into Graves, is assuming maybe Graves will be a frontliner. No, that's not very helpful. And ever since the removal of Galio's ability to W flash, at best you can flash and immediately W, which provides a very short CC. And it's just, he's a very weak initiator without ulting on something. But I will say, he's going to be very good at helping Kindred in the early game, and I think we'll get back to that once we've seen a little more of the draft. Okay. Sorry, and the last thing I wanted to say, when I was watching this draft, there was a very specific hero I had in mind that I thought DRX was supposed to pick right now, and I think it makes their comp invaluable and a straight draft difference in my eyes if DRX were to draft it. I think Ori is perfect here. And I told you I wanted you to pay attention to the Syndra ban. The two safe casters that are incredibly strong laners are Ori and Syndra. They're kind of lane bullies while also being safe-ish scaling casters. Scaling to an extent, of course. I felt that if Ori was drafted right now, it would be very hard for top to get priority in lanes. So the only way to make Kindred scale is for her to take marks, right? And for her to get marks, you have to have lane priority. So it's really important that when you run Kindred comps, you need as much priority as possible. So you can draft a little earlier to get lane priority, and then Kindred will be your scaling condition by getting the marks. And Galio is excellent at helping Kindred in the early game, but I felt that Ori would be a good compromise where they could stick to the theme of their comp, where they can be a little more reactive, or in this case, playing to outrange what top is currently drafted. Ori's very flexible, and they would still have the win condition of outranging their opponent with the ability to divert their comp to something else, depending on the way top esports drafts. Galio's going to be much more one-dimensional in this comp. He will basically only be able to peel and have a very tough time initiating unless another hard initiator is picked. And if a hard initiator is picked to go with DRX's comp, it'll be awkward for Caitlyn and Kindred to easily follow up on their plays. So you would imagine that DRX would want to commit to the outrange condition, the more reactive 5v5 outrange opponent condition. So yeah, I think Ori would have been a great pick here. Seeing as how Syndra's banned, there wouldn't have been a great way to contest it. Galio does get early game pressure on Orianna, but I think that's a small price to pay, and I think it would have been a great. I think it would have been a great pick here. So anywho, then top retaliates with Ori. Once again, Ori's very flexible. Top's comp basically can go in any direction still, but it's definitely looking a little more reactive, but low-ish on range. So Top Esports says, okay, I don't want you to now commit to changing your style of comp and to be something that goes more forward. I'm going to get Camille out of the way, and it'll also stop you from 1-3-1ing well with Galio. Cool. And now DRX, as we already talked about, Caitlyn, playing through Caitlyn is going to be a big win condition. So you're going to say, let's get rid of Blitzcrank. And then Top is going to get rid of Lux because they don't want to get bullied too hard by Caitlyn. And Top acknowledges what types of comps DRX could divert into and what they're worried about. Changing to too much initiation could be is just in general a strong comp, even if it's not a counter comp to what Top is drafting right now. But Lux would very much stick with the style of 5v5 outrange siege, you know? So Lux is a great ban. And then DRX decided to ban Morgana so that Top can't just go Ashe Morgana and leave awkward choices for Top's support draft. At least that's why I feel they did it. We can't know for certain. And then I love what Top does here. I think Lulu Ashe has been a criminally underrated lane. I think Ashe can get through most lane phases by herself, right? Which leaves you a lot of flexibility in which support you would like to choose. And Lulu is such an excellent scaler. She will basically take Ashe, who's she's not as much of a hyperscaler as other AD carries, and will really help her scaling, make her much more of a scaler just by virtue of how Lulu operates. And it's definitely a lane that I've felt has been really underrated. And since a lot of options have been taken off the table already, so usually when you fight Lulu, something like Ashe Lulu and just Lulu in general, you're going to want to try and bully her in lane. You're going to want to go for initiation. You're going to want to look for like Thresh or something, maybe like Leona. But those heroes, Thresh is good. Thresh would be a really solid pick here. But stuff like Leona is not considered very good with Caitlyn. Caitlyn usually wants a hero that sits back with her, pokes, plays to her team fight win conditions. She doesn't want to be running forward trying to catch up with stuff like Leona. And it doesn't like help her poke out in lane. Right? She wants the Morganas. She wants the Lulus herself. She wants the Luxes. And then Auron still hasn't been picked in this draft. Just in general, a really strong hero, but also a really great scaling condition and a very safe blind pick if the top laner hasn't been picked yet. Maybe you also think it could be Lulu top. I think it was already very indicative of Ashe Lulu when I was watching the draft. Unless maybe they can bail out of it if they think the lane gets really hard. Maybe like Thresh would make them bail out of it. But instead, and with a very specific reason, DRX is going to go Bard. The reasoning, of course, being is that they've identified their win conditions, right? Caitlyn is going to need to be Caitlyn, but more importantly, get priority in the lanes, get marks on Kindred. That is our scaling winning condition. Kindred is looking really good this game, and Bard is a roaming support. Caitlyn's going to have the push. Bard is actually going to be able to help Kindred out this game. So it was very important for them to pick it here. They could have definitely gone for something like Thresh to bully lane, maybe forced Lulu to go top, but they know that they're looking to play through Kindred. And then the last pick is Vlad. Top say, look, we don't have any initiators, really, right? We don't have stuff that goes forward. We're playing a very reactive 5v5 comp. Let's just match the scaling with Auron. Cool. So now we see the drafts. Let's take a breath for a moment. Take a sip of cola, if you will. I don't know why I said that. That was super cringe. And let's take a look at these drafts. Top has a draft where the goal, what they want to do is very aligned. So they're low range. That is a low range comp. So outranging them would be powerful. But they're a very good reactive 5v5 comp with very little initiation. So we see comps like this all the time in NA. What that means is they want to be at the objective first. And DRX, on the other hand, they have a comp that's going to have some scaling options as well, right? Both teams have scaling options, but my main criticism of them is they've broken up this comp by picking Galio specifically, because they were in a position where they could have also had a very reactive 5v5 comp, but had a better ranged win condition. Kindred will grow to outrange her opponents because of the way the marks work. At 4, she will have 575, right? At 7, she will have 600 range. That would be a great scaling. That's like a great scaling condition. Great way to beat the opposing team. The only thing that would really pressure her well would probably be Orianna, but it'd be such a nice way to deal with Graves and Vlad. Ornn is a hero that you probably think of as an initiator, and he definitely is, but he's also very good at just peeling and playing reactively, partially because he scales so well, giving away the Ornn items. Galio, however, is what I really thought brought apart this comp. Galio is he's going to have a miserable time just sitting around trying to peel with his W and E, because as you can see, Top Esports didn't draft any hard initiation that puts their bodies forward. Galio has nothing to do. Right? So what's Galio going to do? He either peels with his ultimate from somewhere else on the map, and he's peeling against heroes that just don't go forward. At most, Vlad goes forward with Pool. That's not very helpful. And then if DRX wants to be more proactive and initiate, then the only thing Galio can ult on is Ornn. And let me tell you, like, people are going to have weird conceptions, but it is so crummy trying to initiate with Ornn's E. The best way to make Ornn initiations work is to use his ult and have something that follows up with him. So Ornn plus something else. That is the best way to play Ornn initiation comps. So let's say Ornn like Volibear jungle, right? That's probably too low on damage, but just for the sake of my example, Ornn can set up with the ult, Volley can follow up with his own ult and Q, right? Ornn just setting up for himself with ult is terrible, right? And the only way you can get Galio in there is by Eing in. So Ornn basically is ulting to set up for himself and E. It's not a realistic scenario. It basically never works, and at this level of gameplay, you can't expect it to. So let me really straightforward. Let me tell you what the criticisms of Top Esports' comp are, and why so many people thought that DRX had a better draft this game. So at least so many analysts that I've seen. So the first main thing is that in this game, DRX doesn't build Locket or Redemption on anyone. And those are both items that Ornn upgrades. And Locket is especially important because it gives so much magic resist and is such a good magic damage counter. And that's obviously true, right? Locket was absolutely the buy here versus 2 AoE maged healers. I do think, though, that people underestimate the physical damage coming out of Top Esports with this Lulu Ashe pick. Ashe's going to put out much more damage than you think she might, because I think traditionally you're going to expect Ashe to have low damage output onto Ornn, but trust me, the Ardent Sensor with Lulu's attack speed steroid is going to do a ton of work with Ashe and her Bork. The other thing is the other main criticism that I read is that DRX just needed to go to the objectives first because there's such a reactive style comp, and if they did, Top is just not able to walk up. And I agree with that, but I feel that both teams drafted a reactive comp with low initiation tools, and therefore it's actually a matter of just whoever makes it there first in general. It's not one comp being better or worse at it. Both teams, I think, are going to be favored in who initiates less and who's going to be at the buff first. And that's just what these style of comps look like. I also want to hit everyone with another thought, and I think maybe it's another reason why people said that DRX had a better comp. There's literally one initiation tool on Top, but I think it's perfect. It's Ashe Arrow. Why do I think that's the right initiation tool for this comp? Because as I talked about before, Ash Arrow doesn't commit your body forward. It's actually a very low commitment spell. You throw it, it misses, it hits, you walk up, you don't have to flash, you don't have to use your mobility moves, you walk up and you beat the person up that got Ash Arrowed. And that's what this sort of reactive comp is going to try and do. And I think there's this notion in League Analysis that you need the most well-rounded comp as possible, right? You need like a little bit of initiation, you need a little bit of peel, right? Like you just need like all to try and juggle all these pieces to get a god draft. I don't believe that at all. I think you just need characters of similar synergy that's countering what your opponent's doing. So for example, I think top esports, all 5 of the heroes perfectly synergize with each other. It's completely unnecessary to have a hard initiator like Volibear top as their last draft. I think if anything, Volibear would just hurt their composition. Although it's not the worst this game. But initiation would be totally pointless into Kindred, Galio, Ornn, right? Totally pointless. That's the last thing they want. They want to be as reactive as possible. And then, of course, DRX, my main issue here is the Galio pick. I think it really doesn't fit the theme of the rest of the comp. So let me put down my big thought on this game. Galio hurts the comp so much that even though Ornn is going to give scaling options, a locket, and they're going to have Bard, Caitlyn, and Kindred outranging the competition, as well as making initiations into them difficult. Galio hurts the comp so much that I feel it's effectively a 4v5. So the thought problem that I think needs to be run is, if Galio is getting Kindred that ahead in the early game, are the 4 heroes that are not Galio on DRX's comp so good into top's comp that you're willing to play a 4v5? Because that's how I feel about the game. If you believe that those heroes are so good into top's comp that you can just 4v5 it, then I think that's actually acceptable. I think that's like a worthy game outlook, right? Like Galio served his purpose, and those 4 heroes have such a nice range advantage in the 5v5 that DRX's comp wins. And I think that's like a cool opinion. I think that's reasonable. But in my eyes, I think that those champions being that strong into top's comp isn't enough to warrant a completely dead weight Galio. I think the fact that it's a 4v5 is too much of a crutch and is what makes this game unplayable, I actually feel, for DRX. Now I will say most of these things don't actually end up most of these like comp conditions don't actually end up taking place during the game. It's like more or less DRX making some botched initiates, maybe being slow on objectives. But I think if both teams had been playing at a very high level, I really do feel that top's team did have the advantage because it's more or less a 4v5. Okay, so let's. There's a couple things I want to bring up here. So first of all, I want to show everyone what 2 reactive comps look like. Let me just bring up the draft really quick again. Right, these are both reactive comps. You know, Galio can't initiate properly. He basically has to peel. This is a react, right? Caitlyn, Kindred, all reactive, right? Ornn's going to peel. And then top has literally one initiator, Ashy, and just stuff that wants their opponent to play into them, right? That's what I call a reactive comp. So the way reactive comps work is whoever gets to the buff first, whoever gets to the objective first usually tends to win. The reasoning being is that due to lack of initiation tools, lack of dive, lack of outranging, it's too hard for them to play into each other. So it's really just a matter of who gets there first, and then you're looking at scaling options. Since I watch a lot of North American League, I watch a reactive comp versus a reactive comp basically every single game. I think FlyQuest literally only ever drafts reactive comps, and Team Liquid literally only ever drafts reactive comps, except when they're playing carry Hecarim. So I just brought up literally a random Liquid versus FlyQuest game to find my example, and it took me all of 30 seconds. So if we look at the comps here, right, Mordekaiser wants to be played into. Lee Sin can be either or, but he's more of an early game hero. Kog'Maw wants to poke. He's neither initiate nor reactive, but in this comp will play out as reactive. I think Jin's actually more of an initiate hero. It's a little bit of a misdraft, sort of just to fight Caitlyn. And Zyra's full reactive / siege. Gangplank is all reactive. He doesn't like following up with his barrels. Volibear is actually more of an initiate hero, but people like to draft him in reactive comps because he has crowd control and he's a frontliner. Azir is literally the most reactive, just stand still 5v5 hero of all time. Caitlyn Thresh, reactive, siege, right? None of these comps engage. It's going to come down to who gets the objective first. I found a random fight in FlyQuest versus Liquid. Best of 5. Let me turn up the quality. And you will see that even though the gold values are pretty even, Team Liquid gets to this fight first. They have trouble walking up on Mordekaiser because Mordekaiser's more, he's not good. He's good at being initiated on. So Mordekaiser just ults Santorin's Volibear when he walks up. Now Core JJ playing Zyra has a whole ton of zone control. He just throws the ult down. Liquid ends up getting the Rift Herald. Even though Santorin gets away with his ultimate, Mordekaiser still is able to back up because no one has any real initiate. Now FlyQuest is going to try to go back in because I see health bars are low, but they don't have any real initiation options. So all it takes is a flash out from Impact, and then Wild Turtle tries to walk up, and he gets literally one shot because it's just a reactive comp. Whoever plays into whoever is going to lose, right? Like, once you're at the objective first, you basically win by default. That's just how those comps work, right? And it's kind of how top versus DRX went. Okay. Next thing I'd like to bring up is I will show the Galio wasn't a total misdraft because it really does help Kindred get ahead in the early game. Kindred actually has a spectacular early game getting his marks ahead. Here's a fight that DRX really commits to. You'll see the Bard's here nice and early because he has all that prior from Caitlyn, and he's much, much, much faster than Lulu. Lulu's a very low movement speed hero. Bard's a very high movement speed hero with the chimes. And we have a TP coming in from Chovy, right, which is perfect. He's just going to walk up on them, and perfect, right? Like, no real spikes have come out from top. Vlad hasn't really started to get ahead, and DRX is just able to walk up, right, and do their thing. Even Chovy didn't have to commit flash to get in for his initiate or anything. And bam, right? Easy Kindred mark on the Gromp. And even though there weren't a lot of kills in this game, I don't think the first one happens for like 23 minutes. I don't remember. Galio is still able to secure a ton of marks for Kindred, which offers a super real win condition. Of course, I do strongly believe it just becomes a 4v5 later in the game. And I think the last thing I want to show is kind of what happens if Galio does try to initiate with Ornn. I will say, though, that if DRX were to play optimally, they really shouldn't be initiating at all, and they should just be on the objective. But I just want to give everyone an idea of what the hero Galio looks like. So DRX wants to try and take a fight because they did themselves try to draft the Galio. That was their own decision. And here we have an initiate from Ornn. Maybe Bard and Ornn shouldn't have matched up their ult so hard, but Ornn's trying to go in. Top has a very reactive comp. They're literally just going to walk away because, as you can see, the Ornn ult was mainly initiating for himself, which I said is not a strong use of Ornn's ult. It's better if it's setting up for someone else. So Ornn tries to go off his own ult. He has trouble getting in. He can't find Karsa, can't find Jackie Love, right? And now he's in a position where it's like he put his body forward with E. Chovy wants to ult him, but top is just a reactive comp. They don't go in. They don't need to be peeled off. They are just playing reactively. And Ashe's going to have a way higher damage output than she usually would because she has an Arden censored Lulu giving her attack speed. And yeah, right? And now, like, Kindred is saving Galio just because, like, they're having so much trouble getting out because, like, their comp is so weak at initiating, and they went into a comp that's so good at playing reactively, right? And then they just have a good 5v5. They're going to set up the siege line, and very quickly, Knight's going to find that ultimate, and of course this is like the one big fight that happens. But I'm not saying that that fight didn't happen necessarily because of a draft difference, right? DRX really shouldn't have been initiating like that. They really just should not look for initiates. And as I said before, it's like whenever it's two reactive comps, it's really just going to come down to who is at the objective first. Okay, so just to rephrase, right, the two main issues people had with the comp is that Ornn didn't build Locked-in Redemption. Yeah, totally, he should have. And the other one is that DRX needed to be at objectives first. Yeah, right, both of these are correct, but I think that Galio is such dead weight that it doesn't really matter that they didn't build the optimal items, even if they were super optimal. I think Galio detracts from the comp so much that it's impossible to say that, or no, not impossible, but I feel that Top's esports draft was much better. And the other main criticism that people had was that DRX needed to be at objectives first. And yeah, I think that's what reactive versus reactive always looks like. It'll always come down to who gets the objectives first. Yes, DRX had a little more range, and they could have walked up on top a little more easily, and it's just a straight 5v5 with a skirmish line drawn. But with the Galio, it's realistically still just going to end up being a 4v5, and they don't have like a hard like poke hero like Zoe to just like take top down from a range and play against the low range composition that Top has, reactive and low range. And yeah, that is the video. I just wanted to make it because I thought my opinion differed so much from what I was reading on the internet, on Twitter mainly. If you want to follow me, I'm Cruisa TV on Twitter, I'm Cruisa TV on YouTube, and I'm Cruisa TV on Twitch, and I like doing league analysis. Thank you for watching.